Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. Welcome to Ask an Agroforester. I'm here with Jenn Ripp to talk about bareroot trees. We're here to talk all about bareroot trees, more specifically. And we're looking forward to this conversation. We're happy you're here. I'm going to take a few minutes and just talk about some opening information about ASD and so forth, and then we'll begin. So welcome. Again, hello to Jenn. She's awesome. I can't wait to hear everything she has to say. And before we go any further, just a big thank you to everyone that makes this webinar possible. The Edwards Mother Earth Foundation provides the overarching funding, and then you can see all the other folks that are participating this season. A little bit about ASD. Our mission is to grow a stronger Appalachia through agriculture. And we're doing that in 5 different key areas: workforce development, agriculture education, food access, economic development, and resource management. And that 5th category is where agroforestry falls, although it does sort of like bleed into all the other categories as it should. So a few fun impacts to date. We have sold and distributed a lot of dollars in produce, beef, and value-added products over the last 30 years. We've helped gardeners grow over 171,000 pounds of food, which is crazy to think about. I want to look up a statistic for like what size animal weighs 171,000 pounds so we can quantify that in a different way. It's like, how many redwood trees does that equal? We have installed more than 245 raised beds at schools and clubs and through our veterans programming, and preserve over 5,000 acres of forest land, supported over 5,000 farmers through trainings and resources, and donated over 10 million pounds of local and regional food to area food pantries. So we're doing all kinds of awesome work in and out of agroforestry, and check us out online if you're curious. If you're curious about agroforestry in general, you can go to our programs page. Our agroforestry page has a ton of resources. So if you're interested in things you've heard about today, interested in agroforestry practices in general, how to get started, what grant programming is available, hit up the webpage and be amazed. We've got a few specific grant funding opportunities going on right now that we're working with. One is the Catalyzing Agroforestry Grant Program that is available by selective application to anyone in any of the US states. So that's a really great program because it's so broad, also funded by the Edwards Mother Earth Foundation. And it applies, you can apply for any of the agroforestry practices, or if you have sort of like a niche project that kind of bleeds over between 2 practices, that's a great program because it's so flexible. And then we have the Assets Grant Program through Working Trees, and that is a program to install silvopasture projects and help get funding for installation and technical assistance for installation, as well as an optional carbon credit. So we also have the agroforestry trainings for natural resources professionals, also funded by the Edwards Mother Earth Foundation. They do lots of great work in the agroforestry space. And if you find information like what you find on Agroforester really useful to you, I would advise you to check those out because we've got lots of great trainings that do like silvopasture and silvopasture 201 and design days in the field and forest farming 201 intensives that are weekend long and that kind of thing. So if you really want to dive deep, especially if you are in Appalachia, those are some really good opportunities for you. And you can also go to learnagroforestry.com for online modules that pack a punch. And Jenn could probably talk about that more than I can, but she also leads a really awesome mastermind cohort either once or twice a year to walk through those together, which is a really excellent experience that I got to do a couple years ago. It was great. Hey, Jenn, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is exciting. I never get to geek out about Bareroots, so not often enough.
Yeah. So welcome, Jenn. I'm not going to read her whole bio, but I'm going to do some highlights. Jenn's work is a convergence of her diverse background in farming, her passion for agroforestry, and dedication to education and training. And as a farmer for over 10 years, her work at Savanna Institute focuses on practical approaches for integrating trees into modern agriculture. And I love that about you because I feel like even in our like fun side conversations, like we're we're all on like the practical approach team, and I really do think that's what we need to move this forward. So she's an orchardist at heart. She has a deep love of fruit and nut trees, all sorts of shrubs, and a broad range of experience in annuals and perennials. Everything from seed production, nursery work, planting, tending, maintenance, harvest. And I would say there's even more that she didn't include, like planning and that whole, planning and design processes as well. So Jenn's great. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to hand it over to Jenn to introduce herself and her topic and boogie on.
There we go. Okay, so all about Bareroots. This is going to be a very general approach to what a Bareroot tree is. And this is going to be for folks that maybe have seen it in catalogs, they're kind of nervous about wanting to try it, like kind of weighing the costs and benefits of a containerized tree or a Bareroot tree. So this is going to be pretty general. Bareroots get really specific when it comes to species. Most of my experience is going to be rooted in apples, pears, and fruit production, and kind of stepping into the hardwood realms of things too. But yeah, Bareroots can apply to pretty much any growing situation, whether if it fits you or not. So I'm just going to get into it. Feel free to put questions in the chat, and we will talk about them after. But there's a lot of information in this, so I am going to speed through and pause if we need to, but most likely not. Okay, I'm with Savanna Institute. If you were on this call, I see my coworker Eleanor's on here too. Shout out. If you're on this call, you probably know what Savanna Institute is and does. We do a lot of the same agroforestry work that ASD does, and a lot of really amazing partnerships. And huge shout out to Edward, Mother Earth Foundation, again, for helping us do a lot of our education programming at Savanna Institute. But our region is the upper Midwest, so this is going to be a pretty zone 4 through 6 centric talk. But this is just a quick overview of the sections that we work in. My nursery is right up here, and one day we'll have a little blue star there. This is a bit of more of what we do. We're doing a lot of crop improvement too. So yes, agroforestry, as Emily mentioned, is really needed on a practical level, but we are really hard at work also developing improved crops. So you have the best germplasm to work with and the best chance of success too. And I want to give a huge shout out to Canopy. This is our for-profit arm of the nonprofit. Canopy we do the design, we do get people involved and educated, then Canopy does a lot of the installation, and the nursery grow out for these trees. You'll see Connor Dunn throughout here. He's the nursery manager at Spring Green. He does an incredible job of the stock that he produces. And yeah, it is open right now, so get in while you can and see what's left in the stock. And then another one for the Canopy Compass while you're sitting around this winter. This is a great and free tool right now to be able to not only pick out the plants that you want, but make sure those plants fit the soil, the climate, all of the data that goes into a plant succeeding. You might have your heart set on one thing and the land says a different thing, and the land's not going to change its mind. And then at the end of that, you get a data-driven decision-making profile, which is really extensive and really, I can't recommend trying this enough. And perhaps maybe someone can post a link in the chat at one point. All right, so all about Bareroots. This is going to be a pretty quick and dirty of what is a Bareroot, what are the advantages and disadvantages of working with Bareroots over, say, containerized stock, and then how to briefly grow, store, and handle and plant Bareroots. We're not going to get too much into the planting. There's a lot of references out there for how to plant a Bareroot tree. This is going to be the creation, the storage, kind of all of the other things that go into a successful Bareroot tree. Hey, why are the roots bare? So we have a great photo on the left of Canopy staff, and I apologize, I'm forgetting his name right now. Then on the right, kind of a basic of what this is an apple tree looks like. So you have the rootstock, the trimmed roots, the rootstock, and then the sign on top there. So storing plants this way offers you the ability to store hundreds of trees in a small contained space. Think of it as kind of like an indoor nursery that way. The same advantages of planting trees out into a nursery for their first year are very similar. Like you can contain one spot, you can mouse-proof one spot. This cuts down on energy use too, supplies, and monitoring time. Transportation is significantly easier. And then likewise, you're not carrying a bunch of soil with you. Sometimes soil is going to have noxious weed seeds in it, other pathogens. Sometimes this also happens with bare root stocks, especially pathogens, but there's much less of a chance doing that bare root versus shipping a whole potted plant. Barrett trees have been a preferred method because of the shipment and transport ease, and they're produced with less inputs and labor as compared to containerized stock. So it's more cost effective most of the time. With the right tech information, like this, you can become empowered to utilize the splendor that is Bareroot tree stock. And the 2-word or 1-word thing, don't mind that. So I go back and forth of how it's spelled. There are many nuances when it comes to buying nursery tree stock, and Bareroot perennials may not be what you want. Honestly, may not be. But this is to make sure that you are not afraid of producing, purchasing, and planting Bareroots. Because they can be, and I think are, cheaper to produce, procure, have potential less transplant shock. We'll go over that a little bit. Again, these are all very general things. There's a ton of nuance to all of this work, and then can outperform containerized stock in overall survival and growth rate. So, big thing here. While the nursery industry is regulated, the treatment of your trees can be much, much, much more opaque. So invest in appropriate germplasm stock from a reputable supplier to ensure you don't waste time and money on inferior quality perennials. Don't put 5 years into a tree that was stunted before it was even in the ground. I have seen this happen quite a bit, and it's hard to give up on a tree. But yeah, sometimes you don't know what happened in that storage process. So don't, and also this is more of the nuance going into, don't look for the biggest trees. Look for the most appropriate root to shoot ratio. I have a little bit more on this later, but a lot of nurseries want to sell you the biggest tree because people buy the biggest tree. And so you'll have this really outsourced top that does not match the bottom in any way. And so it's really important to understand what that balance looks like. Damage done in storage can be invisible until after you plant the tree. So this kind of a little bit opaque process really requires you to trust your nurseries and trust the people that trust those nurseries. Fine root hairs tend to transfer better in containers is one thing that we'll talk about too, but the majority of the damage to Bareroots can come from either the initial digging or the storing or the transport. So yeah, you are taking a risk with Bareroots, but there's a lot of aversion that we can have. And that's what the nursery group is working on a lot these days. So Emily is co-chair along with Steve Gabriel and working hard on getting a directory for nurseries that is crowdsourced. So that means people are filling out a form that says, hey, I've always had a great time with this nursery, never any problems, so wonderful. Or, hey, this nursery buys from a larger third sailor and like I've had really hit or miss, or just kind of getting down into it and giving you that information that you need to know to be an informed buyer. So if you want to look into that, we are putting that up really soon. It is done, but check out the Agroforestry Coalition, and then also Steve's project Farming with Trees. It's a SARE-funded project. He's been on here a bunch too, but he'll also have the directory on his website when it's ready. Okay, so why purchase Bareroot trees? What are the advantages over potted tree? You've seen them in catalogs. What is keeping you from that other option? So again, cheaper to buy, cheaper to ship, but there are other benefits too. So this is one of my, I took this picture actually just last Thursday out at the Canopy Nursery in Spring Green, Wisconsin. And this very, very clearly shows what happens to a seedling grown in the field. So direct seed into the ground, into the bed, so bed grown. And then on the right is a container grown tree. So that tree has been grown in that container, started from seed. And it's pretty phenomenal, the difference in root growth for those same trees planted at the same time, roughly the same seedling. But this really all depends on the goal of what you're doing, of whether or not you want to have container or bare root stock. The species, age, and price of your stock depends entirely on your goals. Like if you're doing reforestation projects or conservation, habitat, things like that, where you're planting out a lot of trees, you're planting out, thousands of hazelnuts, and you're not looking to harvest them for humans. So that's going to be always majority of bare root stock because you can use the equipment in order to plant them. So the planters that you put on the back of the tractors, you can basically just make the whole whole process much more efficient and cheaper. Like storing 1,000 potted trees is insane to me. But if you're a backyard gardener and you have less than a quarter acre or just want a couple of trees, containers may make sense for you. But root structure and mass, going back to these photos, is going to be one of the biggest changes. Bed-grown trees have the freedom to make the most robust root structures, and containers are limited to the container size. Yeah, that's my main takeaway. The other advantages are price, like we talked about, but also availability. So you are now empowered to buy bare roots, and you don't have to rely on container trees. Bare roots allow you to mix and match rootstock, like I mentioned before, in order to custom graft your own fruit and nut trees too. And then storage size, again, it would be insane for me to store potted trees. I don't have that kind of access. So just the size is going to be a huge factor in that. And then there are absolute disadvantages. Like we had mentioned, the opaque handling practices. You are not sure what happened to those trees in storage, and it might not be the nursery you directly buy from's fault. Like this might come from a larger nursery that, you know, maybe didn't do so well that year or had a problem with production. But that is something that, again, will keep enforcing that nurseries need to be reputable. So fine root hair, overall, the delicacy of bare roots is the major disadvantage in maintaining the fine root hairs versus the container trees. Then the root to shoot ratio, and I know I'm repeating the same thing, but I really want it to get across these like very main points of the benefits and drawbacks of bare roots. But that root to shoot ratio kind of goes against what the market demands, but like in order to have a really well balanced tree, you need to have the same above and below root mass, or even more root mass. That's my favorite. When I get like a rootstock that I feel like I even have to trim a little bit because the roots are so robust. And then a big thing we haven't really talked about yet is timing. You can't plant bare roots outside of dormancy. So you need to plant them in the very late fall, mid-fall, or the spring. But you can't plant them in the middle of the summer or they will die. I've had some survive, but like they're not happy about it. But basically, if you potted plants, you can plant throughout the season, whether or not they're dormant. Okay, so potted container trees. This is going to be container potted with a little asterisk because there's some really brilliant methods out there right now that involve air pruning, which are different pots and lifted beds designed to pretty much have the air not desecrate, but dry out the hairs, the root hairs that are coming outside of it. So the air prunes the roots for you. And that can be really effective. We're going to go over a study in just a minute that I thought was really interesting. But basically, for potted container ones, the roots stay safe in the winter pots. They're all around less delicate, and they won't dry out as easily in storage. I think I have that wrong up there. Sorry about the typo. You can plant bigger non-dormant trees throughout the season. This is that instant tree thing. And if grown properly, there'll be more fine hair retention. And again, you can have a very robust tree right from the start. And then there's also the idea of like bed-grown trees have these really, really robust root systems, but depending on the space and the size that you're working with, sometimes you want it to be air pruned. Sometimes you need it to be smaller to start, especially if you have like kind of complicated soils that those roots are going to have to break through at one point. But maybe a shovel has a harder time. I don't know. It all depends. That's a very nuanced point though that I probably shouldn't have added. Disadvantages: you're limited by your pot size is going to be your root size. You have a much higher rate of those roots strangling the plant in the first year, and then J hooking too. Like there's a lot of things that happen when roots are contained in that small of an area. Because the plant has grown in a controlled environment too, with a very light medium soil and fertilizer, it may frost heave when planted in the fall, just because those substrates are so different. And likewise, it also might need more watering in the spring because of that light soil that's right next to the tree. And the biggest one is going to be cost. It's going to cost more to produce. It's going to cost more to mail. And again, depending on your goals, you should consider Bareroot. Okay, so this is a wonderful study out of James Madison University comparing the effects of 4 propagation method for hybrid chestnut seedling qualities, which is the hybrid seedling is what we saw from the canopy pictures. So it's studied on bed grown. It's going to be Bareroot, container grown, air prune, and then something called MCM, which is an air pruning method, but with multi-containers. And then that along with 4 different mediums that can read there. And they tested for root collar diameter, first order lateral roots, root volume, and mortality. And found that, I mean, and I picked this out because I definitely have a preference for Bareroots, but outperformed container trees in most settings, unless the site was very dry. And then some deeper results for that. Bed-grown seedlings were more likely to survive than seedlings grown by any other propagation method. And the MCMs were least cost per seedling. Yes. After accounting for both material and labor costs and dividing this total by the number of seedlings that survived to the end of the study, bed-grown seedlings grown in field soils were the least expensive seedlings to produce, while MCM seedlings grown in field soils were the most expensive seedlings due to the high labor costs and low survival. A lot of this is about the numbers too. Lower cost trees at a higher volume, even if you have a lower mortality rate, you could still replant those trees. So make sure you're doing your math when you are mathing out what the benefits of a container over a Bareroot tree are going to be. And then qualitative observation, the root architecture. We're going to look at this. It's a very, very obvious thing in this next slide of what the roots are doing. So on A, that's going to be the container grown. Roots show significant root deformations in larger seedlings. B and C are evidence of root binding and show a highly branched root system, characteristic of seedlings that have their taproot pruned. So instead of having that apex growth down, you're going to have it out. And then D is going to be my favorite, bed-grown seedlings. So they have thicker lateral roots but less fine hair roots than other seedlings. And then this is just a brief overview of kind of those characteristics that we were talking about. The mediums are going to be on the x-axis, and the y is going to be the different factors that were measured, and then the propagation methods. So container grown is this pink one, bare grown is this one, and then air pruned is the blue. MCM is that like bright orange color. Orange? I don't know. The coolest thing about this study is they made this decision matrix, this like flow chart, and I think it's just, I can't wait to talk to Emily more about this, but like why choose one or the other? So we're going through cost. Exerc is, I think that's how you say that, is a dry site. They did find significantly better results doing container grown in drier sites for this study. The nursery setting, if it's indoor, if outdoor, is the nursery soil quality poor or good? It is just kind of like funnels you into which tree that you should be looking at. And I could post that link in the chat after this. Okay, and then all about Bareroots. What are the mechanics of this? What's the morphology of this? The phenology of this is that seasonality is extremely important. The phenology is extremely important for Bareroot trees. In the fall up here, typically Bareroot trees are dug from the growing beds after they go dormant. What does a dormant tree look like? It's going to depend on the species. It has different indicators of when this is happening. Some lose their leaves, while others do not. This happens after killing frost, but before the ground freezes in winter. So that's that window I was talking about before that for us can be like 2 weeks sometimes, or it can be a month, it can be 2 months, and I'm sure it's much different for the Appalachia region too. So also Bareroots can be planted in the fall, and this can be really great to give the plant a head start in the spring. It's already established, so as soon as that ground heats up in the spring, it is like ready to go. But you do need rodent protection. A big reason of why I dig my trees in the fall is because I have very, very, very heavy predation on my nursery, and they are nice and safe in my cooler. So winter perennials are cleaned out, cleaned, packed, sorted, and packed into mediums to stay moist and dormant until the spring planting. It's also the time to order your plants. Well, probably a little bit earlier in the fall is best, and store trees in a safe place if you receive them in the mail before the ground is thawed in the early spring. Have a relationship with your local nursery. Do a custom grow. That is kind of like a nursery CSA where you can get paid. You could, like me as a nursery grower, can get paid for something ahead of time, so I don't have to do the initial investment, and they could be exactly what the customer wants. And if it's a small enough nursery, you don't have to fight people for the last trees in the cooler. And then spring, as the ground starts to thaw, plant it early as you can. I watch for these kind of like killer vortexes because putting a tree into the ground and having sub-zero temperatures is not great. But yeah, so by April is usually good for us. And these are two videos. That shows the dormant, and this shows the non-dormant. So the left one is non-dormant, and the right one was the dormant ones. They played a little bit off, and they're two different nurseries. Okay, storage and handling. This is a big one. Bareroots need to be babied, but they compensate for the adaptability in the field. Root cellars are going to be your most common thing. Perfect for storage as long as it's a proper root cellar with adequate moisture and temperature and protection. No mice in the cooler. They will eat your trees. Ambient room temperature 33 to 34. It can be higher. Like I think my root cellar is usually around 40-ish, which is a little warm, but that's what I'm working with. And then humidity is 95% or higher. Again, do your best. Anything is better than freezing your tree outside on accident or keeping it in your house all winters. It will dry out. And then refrigerator, a modified chest freezer works really great for this too. You can really accurately control the temperature and humidity that way. And then your own fridge works too, as long as the temperature stays consistent and you're not constantly moving trees to like grab the milk and like put the trees back. Like try to just keep them where they're at, especially grafted materials are really delicate. Car garage, yes, but you're going to forget about them. You're going to forget that they're out there. They will most likely freeze when you forgot that they were out there, and they cannot freeze. This will kill all of the fine root hairs on a tree, and most likely will kill the tree itself. And you also don't want it to be too hot because these trees are more likely to break dormancy early and create an environment for mildew and mold to kill your trees. So the bad fungal bacterial pathogens in your cooler is also something to be really aware of, especially in your packing material. Okay, so mediums. Sphagnum moss, for best practice, allows for a long moisture retention and it's slightly acidic, so it can prevent some fungal and bacterial growth. It's reusable. I've been reusing the sphagnum bale that I've had for years. So that's going to be for more of like if you're digging and growing your own trees. And I will send out a little bit when I mail trees out too, because it is just that good. And for us, it's more local and sustainable than peat moss. Wood chips, depends on how fine they are. They range from sawdust to what they call, it's supposed to be shingle toes, which a lot of nurseries have used in the past, which is just like a thicker grade wood chip. So these are the go-to in the industry, is relatively cheap, and things you can send out with trees. But make sure that you are soaking it and then wringing it out, because yeah, well, I'll tell you. Damp paper. This is not my preferred. It tends to become this like colorful, bold experiment in maybe I have dirty newspaper. But if you do want to use that, soak the paper, wring it out, and then let it dry slightly. And check on them throughout the year because I have seen paper kind of collect nasty things. Anything that allows contact directly with the roots, holding a moderate amount of water without drowning the trees. So that's make sure you wring out the paper and the moss. Creating an environment for pathogens to thrive. And then poke holes in the bottom of your bag to allow you to water your trees. So you can basically, like, I use these big black crates with a plastic bag poked with holes in it. And then once or twice in a year, I'll go and just like literally use a watering can and pour water over them just to kind of rehydrate if there's any exposed moss. Emily, do I have time for a quick video?
Do it.
Do it. Okay, this is kind of done talking about sphagnum moss for y'all. Okay.
Moss. So it's skimmed off the top of bogs in central Wisconsin. Harvest interval is around 7 years until you can go back to the same bog.
Wow, slow growing.
In my opinion, it's more sustainable than peat moss because it does just grow back. And you're not kind of just like mining and digging out the whole bog.
Yeah. I use sphagnum moss as best practice packing material, but whether or not it's available is kind of the hard thing.
Because we're lucky because we live in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And this is like a locally available product.
Yeah. How long do you soak it before like wringing it out?
it really just depends.
Yeah. Yeah, I usually would do like soak it for about a day. It can be longer. And then before you use it, wring it out and like set it on a rack to kind of continue drying a little bit, because it can hold a considerable amount of water.
Yeah, so comparing it to this finer wood chip, you know, that probably holds 3 or 4 times its weight in water. This holds about 20 times its weight in water. And this stays much more, it doesn't compress as much, and so it's you know, there's more air if you pack trees with this material, and this is more acidic and more antifungal than
definitely
the wood chip stuff.
Nice.
I'm trying to calculate in my head about how much more expensive it is, though, but it's
a lot. Or it can be if you don't live next to a bog in Wisconsin. But yeah, so if you can, it's also an investment. Like I mentioned, you could reuse it multiple times. So if you're doing your own trees, it's something that like get a hold of it once and then like don't give it away. Yeah, so planting, don't plant a dead tree. So you've succeeded in overwintering your tree and you're ready to go out, or you've ordered a tree and it just got shipped to you. Determine if your tree is alive. And that's going to be a little scratch test that I will go over in just a minute. Make sure that the proper root to shoot ratio, again, is right. I don't need to go over that again. I guess dig a hole big enough for the whole root mass. Mulch. Add inoculants if you want. You can see the beautiful mycorrhizal activity on one of these roots here. Canopy's has been really impressed with the inoculants they're using. I cannot remember the brand, but I can direct you towards who does. And then water. Potted mediums can be much lighter than field soil that we've managed, so make sure you cover also the potted stock with some field soil, because if you'd left exposed, that extra dry soil can wick water away from the tree. And then we can go over this too, but like if you're not buying containerized stock and you're just buying Bareroots, so you need to be really sure of where the root collar or crown interchangeable comes. That is so essential when you're planting out your tree, and it's going to be hard to determine when your tree doesn't come with soil. And it's really species dependent, so just do your research. Okay, so when they are alive, make sure to not ship and receive trees during sub-freezing days. This is how Bareroots die. Very good nurseries are going to be on top of this and making sure that they're not shipping to you while, if there's a chance for it to freeze, if there's a chance for it to sit in a warehouse and freeze, they're gonna do their best to make sure that it's sent to your door alive. But once it's at your door, then it's on you. This is a traumatizing time for trees. Make sure you're working with a good nursery that communicates when things are getting dropped off, where they are getting dropped off, so that you can pull it inside, get it out of the hot sun or the chance of freezing temperatures. And there's a scratch test. Could not find my photo for this, but if you just gently scratch the surface of the bark, and this is going to be different for different trees. If it's alive, there'll be a bright green cameo underneath, and if it's dead, this will be brown. And you'll be a lot better at it each year, being like, that's a dead tree, that's a live tree. Did your trees arrive frozen, dried out, or damaged? Contact the nursery. Once a tree goes into the ground, it's very hard to determine why it isn't thriving, if it's user error or production error. But also, a note for fellow nursery people, please try to troubleshoot through the internet and extension service before blaming the nursery. It is sometimes their fault, for sure, but let them know so that they can issue a refund or change their supplier and grower. It might not be them who packed the tree. It might not be them that... There's a lot of middleman that goes on in this industry, so just letting them know, hey, my tree arrived dead or something like that is going to be important for them to change practice. And then probably don't go to that nursery again. Again, back to the reputable nursery thing. And then look for guarantees on the website before purchasing and what you would be at fault for. And then finally, when they come out of the ground, soak the roots. Before you put them in the ground in the spring, soak the roots. In the fall, try to get all the soil off as you can. And then in the spring, just trying to get them their best start possible. This is a fall dig of apple trees. And like, don't let them dry out in the field. This is as much as I'm going to say about planting, but wow, have I seen some terrible roots just exposed right on top of the surface midday. Try to plant earlier in the morning or later in the day so that you're not working with exposed roots in like the heat and dryness of the day. Yeah, and the takeaways with proper handling and storage, Bareroot offers effectively grown, purchase, plant large scale for large scale goals. It offers more flexibility if you want to graft your own too, grow your own from seed, etc. Some drawbacks: must be planted within the planting season window, early spring or late fall, while the tree is dormant, and then also more technical skills are needed to understand the root-shoot ratio, preserve delicate fine root hairs, and planting depths. But the choice depends on your abilities, goals, and schedule, and you should definitely experiment. Well, and that's it for me. If you need to contact me, I'm pretty easy to find. Those are all of the ways, and I'm sure Emily will be sending this out later.
Thank you so much, Jenn.
Yeah, thank you. Oh boy, there's a lot in the chat, but not in the Q&A so much. So
we've got some good Q&A though, and we've got our early Q&A questions ready to go. So we're about to start the part of the Q&A where I ask Jenn questions that we've identified from folks ahead of time, and then in a little bit we'll open it up to the audience Q&A. So please go ahead and start putting those questions in. I see we've got 5 in there, and by the time we wrap up with this first section, we'll probably have a lot more. But before we do that, we do our just like quick little vibe shake up to talk about something other than trees for a second. So Jenn, what was the last song that was stuck in your head?
Oh, gosh, I don't remember the name of it right now, but I'm a huge fan of the Swedish pop star Robin, and she just put out a new song that I will highly recommend. Like, I could hear the chorus, but I could not tell you what the words are. So.
You're welcome to sing it.
No. No.
Pass. And I know that you have been traveling recently. What was the most interesting thing you ate?
Oh, interesting thing I ate. Oh, that's a good question. I got to try, let's see. I'm always down to try new fruits. This is a good one. Baobab seeds. I had them a long time ago when I lived in Tanzania. And going back, I always thought that they like freeze dried them because they're kind of like styrofoamy fruit. No, that's how they grow. They're like bone dry on the inside, and this kind of like citricy, crunchy, like freeze dried fruit, it surrounds the seeds. It's incredible. I didn't know they came that way.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, there's so much.
Learned every day. Yeah.
Awesome.
This was so fun to research just because like just talking to you about all of this. There's so many things as like nursery people that we kind of assume we're like, that's just the way you do it. And this allowed me to be like, why do we do it this way? So a lot of this is going to be like, this is how I've been doing it. And I'm sure people do it differently and have better or great results. So yeah, caveat.
Of course. Yes. Many, many ways to do things, always. So let's start with, and you covered this, but maybe we just like stepwise think through now that we've like heard all of this, maybe we can like dial back. So I've just arrived my Bareroot plants. Now what do I do?
Well, there's that thing of like, like for pets, like if they're cold, if you're cold, they're cold, bring them inside. But if that is absolutely right, because we don't like springs in the upper Midwest are getting way, way, way more unpredictable. And if you live in the country, sometimes packages gets delivered every which way. So making sure you have like a delivery confirmation and you know where they are is the first thing. Okay, you know where they are. Check them out. Make sure that the roots are moist, and that can just be a touch thing. And you can kind of, a lot of times, bigger nurseries like the DNR nurseries will have big sealed bags, which I actually love because it also keeps the stem really moist too. You'll be able to visibly see like water inside of it. If they're dried out, get them into water, put them in a bucket of water, kind of just rehydrate them for a little bit, and then pack them into that medium. But most likely they'll arrive absolutely perfect, and you could put them in your root cellar or your fridge or even your garage, again, if it's not freezing, until the time comes for them to plant. And best practice is get them in the ground as soon as possible. Okay practice is get them in when your schedule allows.
Mm-hmm. And so one of the things you talked about a lot is like remembering, like, look for a solid nursery provider. Look for a reputable nursery. So tips for that. How do you identify the ideal nursery for what you're looking for?
Yeah, well, a lot of it is word of mouth. I'm sorry to say, but like, don't buy discount trees if you can help it. Discount trees usually have sat a little too long and might be not of the best quality. It's kind of the counteracted thing, or the counterintuitive thing of I want to save money on my planting stock, but over the course of the tree's years, you are going to lose money because that tree is going to take a lot more work to succeed, and it might never thrive. But that being said, yeah, I guess that's maybe one of the only things. Word of mouth is huge. We're trying to formalize that, as you know, as the co-chair of the nursery group, to have this process that isn't, for one, biased on our end, but like have as many people recommend or not recommend nurseries as you can. Also, sometimes nurseries have bad days. Shipping is weird. Temperatures are weird. I would just say, like, find a nursery that is local as possible. If it's local, it has less to go. It's also going to probably be more adapted to your region. There's a lot of small nurseries too that you can really guarantee that the process is done in-house versus kind of this middleman especially with bare root stocks. But like, shout out to the Iowa DNR nursery. They do an incredible job too. So it's not always about the size, but like consistent quality is, yeah.
Excellent.
And so the directory, that's all I got. The directory, which should be out, I think maybe next week.
Yes, I think we're looking at launching it in the next couple of weeks, and then looking towards having a published document sometime early in the new year, just in time for planting season. And so to learn more about that, you can keep an eye on the Agroforestry Coalition's website, because that is where that will eventually live. At least that's the plan for now, subject to change. I feel like you always have to asterisk things like that, subject to change. So, okay, we talked a little bit about regionality. Anything else you want to say about that? Because I know we had a follow-up question about that, but if you feel good, we can just keep rolling.
Yeah, I mean, the closer that the nursery is to you, the less of a, crazy adventure it has to go on to get to your door. And the more likely it's going to be, well, not necessarily, but like the more likely you're going to have a regionally adapted tree as well. But again, that's going to really depend on the nursery. You might have a local nursery that just supplies all of their stuff from a giant nursery and just like, resales, wholesales. It really just depends. So that's why things like that, like the directory, are important. Or also just, ask your neighbors, ask people. If you drive past a house and they have a bunch of tree tubes, you're like, wonder what they're doing. And then you stop in and you say, where'd you get your stock from? Sometimes it's as easy as that. And that's what I do in the country all the time.
And I think another thing about having a nursery that's, local or regional is that it's easier to develop those relationships. Like you talked about, maybe contracting with a nursery to produce the things that, like, exactly what you need. It's another one of those things where the work happens. Sometimes the work happens at the speed of relationships, and sometimes those relationships are easier when you're nearby.
Trees take a long time, so make sure you give it a couple years for your nursery to grow your trees out.
And also, you and I didn't talk about this explicitly in the prep work, but I know that we've joked about it before. Like, if you're going to grow a lot of trees or work with a lot of trees, you're probably going to kill a lot of trees too at some point. Like, Jen, you've never killed any trees, have you?
I'm a professional at killing trees, actually. It's my number one job. Yeah.
And that's
It
okay.
does happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's best to kill the tree versus like you it's like the opposite of like fostering animals. It's like a stunted tree will never recover and then you put a lot of time and effort in. So like my mentor always said like a tree on the compost pile is worth more than it being in the field if you so plant your best stock. Always plant your best stock because it's the next 10 to 100 years of maintaining that tree. That's where the real work comes in.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice viewpoint. It's like we have this really long timeline. So we need to have this like long range perspective. And
Mm,
I think when we're working with this, like, this little item, this young tree and it's with its little naked roots, you're not
hmm
thinking about the foundation for like all of the life and benefits that it may bring in the next many decades. And yeah, it's all
Yeah.
this really important foundational work.
Yeah, and it's not like oh my tree had a rough start, so it's going to be stronger. That is a very counterintuitive idea for trees because especially like with fruit trees, apple trees specifically, like they could stunt and never produce fruit, and then year after year you go, oh, I'll give it one more year for it to produce fruit. All the while you are maintaining the fence, you're weed whipping around it, you're trying to give it more nutrients because it's not producing. But it might have just been, kind of doomed to begin with.
Okay, so root crowns, root collars. If we're looking at planting guides, these things are often referenced as being like this really important divergence point between the two halves of the tree. Can you talk a little bit about like how to identify that, why it's so important, how to plant respective to
Mm.
that?
Yeah, so the root crowns and collars are going to be different for most species of trees, and I'm not going to get into specifics because we have 5 minutes left. But paying attention to where the root collar or crown should be on a tree is really important. Again, if you're working with like apples, pears, cherries, things in that family, or things that are grafted, you need to make sure you don't plant the tree too deep. At that point, if the scion wood above the graft union can sense the soil below, it will overtake whatever rootstock you put it on. And then also damaging is if you plant a root collar too deep, that's going to really affect the growth of a tree. If it's a tree that needs that root collar to go directly onto the surface level, yeah, but it's going to be species dependent. So just look it up before you plant anything, and don't assume that planting a tree deeper is going to be better for it.
So people talk a lot about these fine root hairs. Can you just talk a little bit more about what they are and why they're so important and what they're doing?
Yeah, so fine root hairs really determine the success of a tree. Like a tree can survive without them. And like we saw from that study, the bare root or the bed grown trees are going to have less fine root hairs because you're jostling them, right? You're jostling to get them out of the ground, you're jostling them in the cooler. So they're just overall going to have less. And so that takes down the water and mineral absorption rates. So the fine root hairs pretty much add surface area okay, I have a definition of the tubular extensions of the epidermal cells. Those are the root hairs. And so if you want the most surface area to absorb the most nutrient, that's going to be in the fine root hairs. Some trees don't have them. So again, this is all species dependent. And in that case, more mycorrhizal partnerships form. This is the case for a lot of pine trees. But yeah, the root hairs are also just the extenders of the roots, and those are going to also intertwine with the mycorrhizal activity. And then shout out to using inoculants. I'm a big fan to get that mycorrhizal activity kind of going as soon as the tree's in the ground. And that's going to act as extension of the fine root hairs in the root system overall.
Do you have, I know you said that Canopy has some specific inoculants. Do you ever make your own
Mm-hmm.
inoculant? Do you like to use forest soil? Do you like the powder? Do you like the slurry? Like, do you have preferences about all that?
Oh, well, I will live and die by Michael Phillips' everything. So I will just shout out the holistic gardener brew that he uses. I'm not going to remember exactly what they are right now. But yeah, and it's going to also ask your nursery, ask your provider, see if your organic cert recommends it or not. It's not something that's totally necessary. A lot of times, like the mulch that you're putting on top of the tree, if that is a good mycorrhizal zone, you're going to have a good fungal network. But more and more and more, we're learning the importance of that fungal network in the success of trees. So don't ignore it.
Okay, so last question before we move into the audience Q&A. We know we're not digging bare trees in the summer because we're not going to dry out all that material. We're digging these in the dormant season, right? So what are your thoughts? We can purchase as consumers bare roots in the fall and the spring, in the winter. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on when to plant? Are you a spring planter or a fall planter? Somewhere in between? And I know a lot of it just comes down to preference, but we would love to hear your preference.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I did hear a kind of a horror story of planting potted chestnuts in the fall and having them frost heave because those mediums are so different and the ground freezes and kind of shoves the tree up, similar to what it does with posts. Yeah, I've always been a spring planter. This was something we were going over. I was like, but why? I think it's just the window for planting is sometimes longer, like in the spring, or maybe I just have more energy. I think I just physically have more energy in the spring to like get out and do it versus the fall, which like, yeah, you have a couple of days that are all of a sudden -0, then all of a sudden the ground's frozen and you're like, well, there's that. Thanks, Eleanor. Thanks for coming. But it really depends on your climate too. I have heard that warmer climates, fall planting can be better for what you were talking about a couple days ago of like, then it's in the ground and when the spring hits, it's ready to go. For me, it's usually just a timing schedule thing. I have seed crops I'm usually pulling out in the fall and I'm not thinking about planting trees. I'm thinking about protecting everything. So yeah, it really is more about the schedule of my other farming and life adventures.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think, there's the whole, like, when is the best time to plant a tree? And it's 30 years ago. Second best time is right now. I feel like the second best time is like as soon as you can get to it,
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely planted Bareroots out like June 1st and they were not happy. And I see them in the field and they're still not happy. And I'm thinking about pulling them out because yeah.
Yep.
So
yeah, we're time limited, we're resource limited, we're all doing our best out here.
All doing our best.
And it's okay to plant them and then harvest that mistake, right? You're like, well, I planted in June. Now I know I'm not going to do that again.
This is one pro tip that I didn't have space to mention in there, but like a lot of times for dormant stuff, it'll kind of start leafing out in the cooler, or you'll notice it, and then you'll panic. That's not the worst thing in the world. Yes, get to it, but like sometimes trees arrive and they're already budded out, and you're like, oh no. It's okay. I really recommend to lessen transplant shock is to like get those trees outside under a big shade tree or shade of some sort, not in the direct sun, and let the leafed out leaves acclimate before you put them into the ground. So just like in general, let the tree more gently wake up because it is already really ready to wake up. And then that root to shoot ratio, cutting back trees if they have a really small root system, those are both going to help in the transplant shock.
All right. So we have a lot of questions in the Q&A. Which is great. So let's go ahead and dive in.
Yeah.
One that was just dovetailing right into what we were saying. Where did it go? Oh no, I
there's
lost
one
it.
about what's a good root to stem ratio? Half and half, ideally. This is a pruning principle too, of like you don't want to the bottom and the top should mirror each other as far as mass goes. Now that's hard because roots have the fine root hairs and you just have this one stem, so it's a hard thing to kind of gauge, but you can tell when it's really off. So the right root to shoot ratio is anything that is 50% root, 1-to-1 top and bottom, or bigger root systems than the top.
Would you ever, if you have like a really big top and it's like maybe like the bottom looks good, it's just not anywhere near the volume, would you ever prune back the top just to make it more matchy?
Totally, absolutely. Yeah. Again, because nurseries aren't going to do that for you because they want to show you a 4 foot tree. Um, but yeah, so it's just something to be aware of. That's a pretty common thing for people planting trees, and they're like, it'll leaf out, and then all the leaves will wilt back, and it's because the reserves and the roots are gone, and it can't support the full development of the top portion.
Well, and when you're at, I don't know, Tractor Supply or Home Depot or whatever, and you see those big, like field of potted trees, and it's like these
Hmm.
huge tops, and it is amazing to think about like how much work they have to do every day just to keep that like little 2 gallons of soil like producing
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think fertilizers will do that too, but yeah, there's a lot of good YouTubes out there showing you how to kind of rectify that too. It's like lateral cuts along coming out from the tree stem, just like trying to break the roots up a little bit because it is really suffocating in there most times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, this is a question. I'm not sure if it's specifically about overwintering, but it might be a good excuse to talk about overwintering bare roots.
Hmm.
This person says, while I purchase a lot of bare root plants for my nursery, I often don't know where they ultimately will be going. Some
Hmm.
of these I'll put in grow bags, fabric grow bags into the ground, and then I can just pull them up by the handles. How do you
Yeah.
feel about that? Anybody else doing that?
Yeah, so I've seen this at there was a defunct nursery in Iowa, Bailey's Nursery, and they had like a whole field of 5 gallon pots sunk into the ground for just that thing. It's another way of keeping the roots contained without, hopefully you don't have them in there for like a long, long, long time again, and the roots have that ability to strangle themselves. But it is a really way to basically have a really nice pruned tree right away. So on the production end, that makes a lot of sense to do it that way. But again, whatever container size you're using is going to be the max for your root system. And then when people go to plant that like Home Depot 4 foot tree in a 1 gallon pot, they have a tendency of only digging the hole to fit that root mass, and that is also not something that you want to be doing.
And so let's say you are what would be best practice then if you were going to plant that tree as opposed to
Mm.
the little tiny 1 gallon hole?
Yeah, so that lateral cuts radiating out from the stem are going to allow you to spread the roots out as much as possible. So you're taking that really big clump of roots and just trying to tease apart roots as much as possible, and then making your hole probably twice the width uh, of that. And I would say twice the depth, but again, back to that root collar thing, that's going to be important in the depth of what your tree is like. Just make sure it has as much room as possible to spread out. So that's why, like, when you're planting bareroot trees and they have lateral roots that are going a foot in either direction, it's annoying to plant, but wow, you have 2 feet of roots in the ground now, and that's a pretty good start.
Um, did we talk about wintering outdoors
Mm.
for those who can for bare root trees? I feel like there was
Hmm.
a question about this. I think that's what I was looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do that with my chestnut seedlings right now because I am trying to test for fold hardiness in those. So I wrap all of my chestnut trees in field because I want them to experience those winters. Again, a professional tree killer, this is what I mean. Um, yeah, we didn't even. Hi, Gary. Nice to see you. Gravel bed. We didn't even get to talk about that. Gary Wyatt of University of Minnesota is a wonderful agroforester, and gravel bed nurseries are incredible in retaining the fine root hairs and allowing the root systems. But an ease of digging the trees up too is really important for that. But back to the overwintering question. There's a lot of like spiral tree wraps that you'll see nurseries have. Those tiny little trees overwinter are probably the first thing that deer go for and voles go for. So you need a hard seal between your tree and whatever a vole could eat. Rabbits too. That's yeah. So there's just like when I try to time my fall digs out to where I'm waiting for everything else that is delicious to a rabbit to die, because as soon as that happens, the rabbits start going for young trees. But if they have, like clover and, grass and like all these other things to eat, that's fine. But once that starts dying off, then you start to get in trouble and they start looking towards your trees like they are the tastiest, most nutritious treat. So that's kind of the pluses and minuses of winter in the nursery.
All right, so let's see. Russ asks, when I have planted bareroot trees and shrubs in my nursery, I find it very laborious to dig the plants out when it's time to send them off to their permanent homes. The roots often go very deep and are very long. Any advice on how to cope with this? Sounds like a good problem to have. Sounds like healthy plants. But
yeah, totally. Yeah, it might be time to look into air pruning. So there's specialized containers. There's different ways of doing it. The study that I mentioned has a lifted bed. So it's basically just a grow bed, but lifted off the ground so that taproot's never developing. So you don't have to follow the taproot. And I totally hear what you're saying. And it hasn't been shown to be like significantly from what that study, it sounded like the normal, hard plastic containers that you see trees in is like maybe the worst way to grow trees. And then there's like a spectrum of these new air pruning methods that people are having a lot of success with. And that's because the roots aren't going to kind of circle back in on themselves, and they're going to keep developing. They're just going to be manageable. So yeah, I would look into that raised airbed method.
And I linked the Ask an Agroforester playlist for someone earlier in the chat, someone who needed to leave early. But if you go into that playlist, there is, in the first season, we did a episode with Sean Dombrowski on trees from seed, and that is almost entirely about air prune beds. So definitely, if that is interesting to you, especially if that's a new topic, check out that episode because it'll tell you all about it. So we kind of hit part of this question already from Rachel. She says, thanks for the presentation. What is the protocol for growing saplings from seed in a field or raised bed setting? And she has spacing and depth questions. I don't know if we want to get that granular or not because it's so dependent on like per species, but I wanted to give you take a swing at that if you would like. Since
how in depth we should go. Let's see. So growing saplings from seed. Saplings, so I'm guessing you're doing like saplings like hardwoods, the maples, the oaks, the hickories, things like that, from seed in a field or raised bed. It really all depends. What I've noticed that's really good for hardwoods is these like the raised bed things that we mentioned, which can be like a 3x6 box that has hardware cloth and mesh on the bottom to do the pruning. And there it's just like as many as you can grow. Seeds like to germinate together, and they're easier to kind of see that way. Sometimes like I sprouted a bunch of butternut seeds just in like a bucket because they kept each other moist and happy. So as far as depth and spacing and the initial grow out, the smaller the better, just so you can keep a hold of it. With seeds, they'll start sprouting and they'll start growing, and then I would plant like chestnuts. I planted at 1 foot by 1 foot in my personal nursery. That's kind of what I'm just used to doing with apples. It seems to work great, but again, I'm sure someone has a more specific answer than that for you. And then based on the seed too, how far down you should plant it. Like chestnuts really like to germinate almost right at the surface. It's going to be dependent on the species. So sorry for the non-answer, but yeah.
And she also asked, what is MCM exactly?
Let's see if I can find. Quick note too about seedlings in the field, rodents. Putting a nice juicy chestnut in the field and not having adequate rodent protection, you better be planting enough of them for them to be full, or they will come and just like pick everyone out and eat it. I'm sure you've seen that again too. MCM is a multi-container What I've seen is they're like square air prune containers, but instead of like just controlling the taproot, which is the air prune, um, you start the seed in one kind of container and then you move it to the next kind of container. That's the multi-container effect. And what that looks like, I think, is really different across the industry. But again, another not answer. It depends.
Okay. Got a couple real straightforward ones. Oh, where'd she go? Does the high humidity for tree storage lead to mold issues?
It definitely can. Yeah. And what I was reading, like best practice is that really high humidity level. Mine's usually around like 60 degrees or so, and there's a lot of people that want to store in your root cellar is also your root crops. So you also have like your onions and your rutabagas and whatnot. So kind of striking a balance between those things not molding, but your trees still being happy. Um, is hard to do in some spaces. What I have found when I need to store things in a root cellar with things that prefer much drier conditions, much lower humidity, especially like biannual seed crops. Well, no, those actually want more moisture. But like, yeah, so everything wants something different. A lot of times I will make sure the whole tree is kind of in a humidity dome of sorts, which could just be a plastic bag, something to keep things from drying out. Um, 95% is that best practice? Yes. Is it practical? Not for most people. So making sure that your root ball has that packing material in it, that mediums that we talked about, whether which one to use, and then sealing that from air so that water moisture isn't going to evaporate out. That's going to be the most important part.
So you're sort of creating a little like extra high humidity chamber within the other,
Yeah,
relatively low
yeah.
humidity.
Yeah, and like as far as like fungal growth and things like that, make sure just like keep everything clean. Depending on your organic standards, like bleach can be a friend for surfaces, just to try to keep things as clean as possible. Don't spray bleach on your trees. I'm not saying that, but making sure that there's not, if mold or something like that starts, that you take care of it. And that's just going to be a monitoring process. And I've had trees with some like kind of white mold on them before go into the ground and do great. I've had some, it completely kills the tree. So,
Mhm.
gosh, I'm not giving specific answers to this general talk. I'm sorry. Yeah,
That
Emily, what do
is
you have
quite
to?
all right.
Yeah, we were talking about your ecosystem and your nursery cooler, and it's yeah, just finding the right balance. It's a game.
Yep, it is. And, and it fluxes and you learn things all the time and you
Mm,
kill some trees and then you have some great successes and,
you kill some trees, yeah.
it's an
Mm,
adventure. Um,
yeah.
okay. When you say don't allow them to freeze, do you mean don't allow roots to freeze solid or don't allow them to be exposed to freezing temperatures at all?
The second one, fine root hairs do not want to be exposed to freezing temperatures at all. And it's going to be a bummer when you go to like unwrap your root ball and you can kind of feel that the paper is like a little frozen, or even the towel you have around them is like a little frozen. That's a very bad sign, because if that towel is kind of crunchy, your fine root hairs are most likely gone. So they're going to be the first thing to freeze off, unfortunately.
Got it. All right, let's talk about inputs. What inputs are you using during your first couple of years to establish your trees?
Depends on your budget, really. I think the two things you need to invest in, no, three. For the first couple of years, you need to water your tree once a week. You need to, like whether it's container or bare root, that's going to make or break your success. If it doesn't rain for a week, you need to be out there hand watering. And that's what we talked about before too, is when we work with folks in designing their systems, they're like, oh, I don't have water. I don't have water at my site right now, but like, it'll be, it might not be fine. It very much might not be fine. A big thing that most people forget too is if we have a really dry fall, going into freezing temperatures and the ground freezing when the ground's already dry, that's where trees like die. That is a huge like kill zone for trees. So part of my winterizing practices, if I know we don't have adequate ground moisture, I will go and hand water my trees in for the winter. It's one of the most effective things you do to stop trees from dying over the winter. So with watering, mulching is going to be a big part of that too. I'd say mulch is required, but like again, if you're going to plant a tree and you don't have mulch, you should still plant that tree. And then fencing. So good predator protection, whether that's voles, mice, rabbits, deer, whatever is in your area, making sure you have a fence or a tree guard to stop those is going to be a success. As far as like any sort of fertilizers, I don't really do a lot. I'm very blessed with some very good soil, and I prefer working with trees because they are way more adaptable than annuals. Um, so yeah, make sure you're planting the right tree at the right time in the right place. And yeah, I haven't used a nitrogen or phosphorus fertilizer on most of my stuff. If you're growing for nursery production, that's a different story, or can be a different story. But yeah, it's really up to you what inputs you want to use. Just make sure that it's guarded and watered.
Let's talk about mulch for a second. I feel like we haven't
Let's talk
gotten
about
to
mulch.
dive into mulch.
Mhm.
So that's my
Great.
question. Let's talk about mulch.
Yeah. So good. This will be back to Michael, the great Michael Phillips, and his ramial mulch obsession. Um, Yeah, oh, it's just so nice. So radial mulch is small diameter wood that is chipped and spread onto the top of your trees. It creates a better fungal environment than most wood chips or sawdust because most wood chips are going to be a lot higher heartwood to bark ratio. So the heartwood's going to be the carbon, the bark is going to be the nitrogen, and the ground, as it decomposes things, are trying to figure out that balance. And so a lot of times if you put really heavy carbon on top of your plant, it's going to kind of leach nitrogen out of the ground in order to fulfill its needs in breaking down and decomposing. So the best mulch in the whole world, if you can do it, is ramial mulch that's already slightly decomposed, because then you don't have to worry about it trying to figure itself out and pulling your soil into it. So slightly decomposed is going to be like the best mycorrhizal network like base that you can have and act as an inoculant. Like I really do believe that ramial mulch like is the inoculant, is the additive that trees need.
I love
But
it.
no, that any mulch is better than no mulch, whether that's plastic, or we've been doing a lot of experiments with like green mulch at our demonstration farms with cover crops. Um, yeah, it's there's a wide range. Mulch isn't available to a lot of folks too. If you're in the I states, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, you don't have a hardwood, you don't have like tree trimmers coming out and dropping you off, a garbage truck full or dump truck full of wood chips. So there's other alternatives that people are seeking out. One being like these like wool mats that can help a lot too. Yeah, people are getting pretty creative, even like doing some sort of green cover. As long as you're keeping the competition of the grass down and trying to retain soil moisture, it's a mulch.
And what do you think about like how thick, how far out from the trunk, how near to
Mhm.
the trunk or not near to the trunk? Thoughts on
Yeah,
the spatial layout there?
yeah. Um,
I'll answer that question. Let
okay,
Chuck
good.
answer.
Yeah. Um, okay, got it. Sorry, now I'm distracting myself. Yeah, about a foot out from the center of the tree, 4 to 6 inches is ideal. That's what we really advise folks on. So that's a 2 foot diameter around the tree. Which anything more than that is great, but a little bit unnecessary, and maybe a little waste of mulch. And then making sure it's not piled up at the base of the tree because you don't want that moisture to be collected right there. You're going to get a great area for pests to hide, but also like yeah, funguses really like that too. So you'll see in town like the volcano method, and it doesn't have to be dramatic, but just making sure that it's 4 to 6 inches high all the way around, but that you can still see that root crown, collar crown, and like pulling it back from the base of the tree.
The big donut.
Big donut,
Really
yep.
little hole.
No volcanoes, no volcanoes,
No.
donuts, yeah.
Um, are you using mulch in the nursery beds themselves or any sort of like cover cropping recommendations for that?
Yeah, totally. So I also grow vegetable seeds in an alley cropping system at my place. So my choice on cover crops is pretty limited because of pollination. Basically, I can't plant cover crops that would have a chance of resprouting and messing with the pollination of these garden crops that I'm growing. So actually, mine's really limited to buckwheat and crimson clover are my go-tos for this. Buckwheat is great for like fast cover to kind of broadleaf outcompete some of the worst leaves. And then underneath it, the crimson clover is a pretty slow, consistent grower. With both of those things, especially the buckwheat, is you really have to watch it because it will grow overnight and shade out your plants. And I have absolutely killed trees that way. It's like really, really good at what it does, like a little too good sometimes. But it makes for a great, like, I pull it out and then lay it next to the tree and it becomes this like really nice mulch that way too.
Okay, so you're not quite using it in the actual like nursery bed rows alongside any trees. You're more using it and like
Oh, I am.
harvesting as a mulch.
Oh, I am using it in the beds of the trees, but buckwheat terminates so well. That's what I
Mhm.
like about it. So terminating it is easy. So I can get that quick growth, that quick cover in the spring when all of the other grasses really want to take over, especially the cool season grasses. Um, and then just like quickly cover it, like quickly terminate, quickly cover, and it's not going to kind of incessantly grow back the way like a vetch would. I've kind of gotten
Right.
away from vetches for that reason. They're a little too good at growing, and they're
They
hard to
like to hang
terminate.
on.
So
They like to
yeah,
hang on.
if I could give everyone just like do whatever you can to not weed whip your nursery. Like you'll start a weed whip and you look at your nursery and you'll think your weed whip's 10 feet away, and then all of a sudden 10 of your trees are girdled, and you're like, what happened? Um, that's like the biggest killer of nursery trees in my practice is, oh, I'll just quickly run the weed whip through it. Nope, nope, nope. So I'm trying to trick myself when I plant to make it hard to weed whip so that I won't do it.
I think that's wise. And I want to shout out to your like agroforestry superstar humble rag. You're like, my nursery is actually an alley cropping system too.
Yeah, it's nice. Well, I cope, like I love
I
having
love it.
cropping. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I
And it's
have a
just
space I'm turning over into that exact same thing because I think it makes so
mhm.
much sense. Yeah.
Yeah, ideally I want to be able to do an alley of nursery trees, so like especially like hardwood trees. So like having pines as my alley crop for my chestnuts or something like that. So then I can kind of
Cool.
build this whole fungal network instead of the bacterial that the annuals will need and then the fungal. Yeah. So
Super
just
fun.
want to just want to mulch everything all the time.
Um, all right. So John is asking, says, I've been thinking about starting seeds in a raised air prune bed, then harvest
Hmm.
them in winter, and then transplant them into the gravel bed in the spring to harvest in fall. So it'd be kind of a like 1-1 stock type. And what are your thoughts about that model?
Well, I guess like what if you're harvesting them? Starting to see, I guess my first question is what environment are you in? Because I don't know if that would work in the frigid north that I live into. But I would just keep them in the air prune bed and then transplant them directly into the gravel bed from the air prune bed. I'm not sure where the harvesting the winter part comes in, or like why kind of like dig them up, store them, and then put them back out in the gravel bed. For fall planting, yeah. Yeah. For fall planting is nice because you're digging up your trees and then you just put them right into the ground. And that whole like storage, having the tree kind of try to adapt to where it's at is gone. You can just dig them up and then put them in. Actually, Canopy, right before we got on this, had a post of like their process is digging nursery trees in the morning and then planting in the afternoon. So just like getting it directly into its next place is going to save a step. And like with a lot of these processes, the less you touch them and handle them, the higher the lower your overhead costs are going to be too, and the more time you might have to live your life, which is always the hard part.
It's really nice to have time to live your life. And then we've got just some interesting commentary happening. That same questioner said they're in the Pacific Northwest, much, much milder. Lots of people like to plant in the fall here because they have such a huge drought in the summer. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Then we've got some folks chiming in about weed control and nursery beds, attempting to use pumpkin as a cover crop and smothering a bunch of persimmons.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I have a story about that. So I co-farm with my friend that I used to grow a lot of seeds with, and we are still trying to figure out. Well, we've decided that any sort of like squash, cucumber especially, can only go into alley cropping systems that have a tree tube on them, because I also lost a few trees because those squash grew overnight and just grew straight over the top of some of my little tiny whips, 1 foot tall whips in the ground. So alley cropping is fun because you get to do it with your friends and you get to really utilize the space. But the relationship with between the plant rows and with your co-farmers is, it takes kind of constant modification, and we get better every time. We don't get mad at each other. That's the good part. We're just like, squash. And squash are also pretty amenable to just like being kind of thrown around. And so like I created these extensive barriers, and actually the buckwheat worked well as like a physical barrier for some of the squash leaves to deter them and go around the trees instead of over the top. So
nice. Well, we are at 1:29 officially, so we are going to not ask any more questions because we don't have any time.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But we do want to say thank you to Jenn. Thanks so much for being here and chatting with
thanks
us.
for everyone.
And do you want to plug PFG briefly?
Oh my gosh, yes. Wow, I just got back from a pretty long trip, and I've been in cahoots with Emily and Steve of the nursery group to make this massive plant swap at the Perennial Farm gathering. When they were polling staff and trying to figure out what time of year to have the PFG, I rallied so hard to have it in mid-March, because mid-March is plant swapping season, and that's how I connect with people. That's how I think a lot of folks find like the relationship aspect of the work that we do. There's nothing like getting a tree or trees or shrubs or hard cuttings from like someone you really love and planting them and watching them grow and updating your friend about them and asking about them. It's just like it opens up this whole world of connection that sometimes can be missing in the work we do because we all live pretty far apart. So the plant swap is going to be part of the Perennial Farm Gathering, as well as a nursery intensive afternoon that Emily and I and Steve and a few other people, I think Connor's going to be out there too. So we'll learn all about nursery stuff, and then we'll get to trade plants. There are stipulations to this though, asking folks to bring a dozen copies of something that's like important to them. Trying not to do potted plants for everything that we just talked about. It's a pain to store and transport. Also the soil part, all of that. So we're asking folks to have less than 18-inch Bareroot stock, or hard cuttings, or seeds, or art projects, or poetry, or kind of whatever. Even if you don't have plants and you're not a nursery grower, you don't have room for plants, like just like come and swap something that's important to you. It's going to be really cool. So that is March 11th through 13th in Dubuque, Iowa, at a really, really beautiful venue. We're trying to move it around to the different places in the Midwest so that everyone has a chance to come. And I really hope to see you all there. The tickets are on sale now. We have 2 phenomenal keynotes so far. One of them is my dear friend Wendy Johnson, who is a badass. I don't know if I can say that anymore, but she's a badass agroforester in Iowa, and people that are really changing the landscape of a very, very corn, soy dominated state. So yeah, come see us. It'll be fun.
Yeah, join us. We'll be there. C will be there. A lot of other amazing people will be there.
All the cool kids will be there.
Thanks everybody for being here, where also all the cool kids are. And we'll see you hopefully this Thursday. Till next time. Bye, y'all.
Bye.